My head pounded like a drum, an aching, relentless rhythm that pulsed behind my eyes. I groaned, rolling over onto silk sheets that felt too soft, too luxurious. Wrong somehow. The scent of expensive perfume and fresh lilies filled my nose, mixing with something clinical, like the lingering trace of a hospital visit. My fingers curled against the fabric, the texture unfamiliar. My eyelids fluttered open, and that was the first shock. The bedroom was enormous, bathed in soft morning light spilling through towering windows. The kind of room that only existed in billionaire mansions or magazine spreads. A massive chandelier glittered above, and near the vanity, a closet door stood ajar, revealing rows of designer shoes and clothes in neat, color-coordinated perfection. My heart pounded. Where the hell was I? Panic surged through me as I sat up too quickly, my vision blurring. That was when I saw my hands. Delicate, manicured, not my own. My stomach twisted. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the mirror. The woman staring back at me was beautiful, striking even, but she was not me. High cheekbones, full lips painted a deep red, and piercing green eyes. A face I had seen before. Veronica Sinclair. I felt the blood drain from my face. No. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But then, like a dam breaking, the memories rushed in. I saw glimpses of her life. My life now. Veronica Sinclair, the infamous, cruel, heartless wife of Blaine Sinclair, the billionaire CEO. A woman despised by everyone around her, feared by the staff, gossiped about in high society. But the worst part. She had been a monster to a little boy. Theo. My stomach lurched as memories surfaced of the way Veronica had treated her stepson. She had used him like a bargaining chip, an emotional weapon to manipulate Blaine, demanding his attention by making Theo suffer. Whenever Blaine was away on business, Veronica had made sure the boy was miserable, just to guilt Blaine into coming home. And then, the worst, the things she had said to him. You're so weak, just like your useless mother. No wonder Blaine doesn't love you. You're nothing but a burden. Stop sniveling, you think crying will make your daddy come home faster? Pathetic. I covered my mouth, nausea rising in my throat. What kind of monster had she been? What kind of monster had I become? The realization hit like a punch to the gut. If I was in Veronica's body, then that meant the real her was gone. But this was my life now. And if the memories were correct, my ending had already been written. Veronica Sinclair had died at the hands of her own cruelty. Her neglect, her selfishness had turned the world against her. Blaine had grown to hate her. The media had painted her as a villain, and she had eventually met a fitting, lonely fate. If I didn't change things, I was going to die just like she did. A soft, hesitant knock pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. I turned sharply, my heart racing. Madam." A small voice squeaked from the doorway. "Theo." I stiffened as the door creaked open, and there he stood. A small boy no older than 7. His dark curls slightly messy. His deep brown eyes filled with hesitation and fear. My stomach twisted painfully. The last thing I wanted was for him to be afraid of me, but of course he was. Because Veronica had made sure of that. He clutched the hem of his oversized sweater, eyes downcast. Flinching. The sight shattered me. "Did you need something?" asked, keeping my voice soft, careful. Theo flinched at the sound, as if expecting cruelty. He shook his head quickly, taking a tiny step back as if preparing to run. My heart clenched. He shouldn't look at me like that. No child should ever look at an adult like that. I forced a gentle smile, though my insides were churning. "Theo, it's okay. You can tell me." He peeked up at me, hesitant. I just... "You always tell me to check if you're awake before breakfast." His voice was barely above a whisper, so timid, so cautious. Like he was navigating a minefield. Another rush of memories. The old Veronica had forced him to wake her up every morning, just so she could scold him for bothering her. If he was even a minute late, she would snap at him, call him useless, tell him he was an inconvenience. All just another way to make him suffer, another way to use him as a tool to get Blaine's attention. I wanted to throw up. Slowly I exhaled, pushing back the rising guilt. I knelt down to his level, keeping my movements careful. You don't have to do that anymore, Theo. I was wrong. I shouldn't have made you do that. I'm sorry. The words felt foreign but also right. Theo's big brown eyes widened, confusion flickering across his face. He seemed to be waiting for something, a cruel remark, a slap, something awful. But when nothing came, his tiny shoulders tensed up as if he didn't know what to do with kindness. He quickly looked down, mumbling, "I'll go now." He turned to leave, but something in me snapped. I couldn't let him walk away thinking this was just another act, another mind game. Before I could second-guess myself, I reached out and gently placed a hand on his head. Theo froze. "You don't have to be scared of me anymore, Theo," I whispered. "I promise." I felt his tiny shoulders shudder, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, still as a statue, as if waiting for the illusion to break. It would take time. Time to undo all the damage. Time to prove to him that I was different. That I would never hurt him again. As he scurried out of the room, I let out a shaky breath. This was my second chance. I wasn't going to waste it. I wasn't going to be the villain of this story anymore. The silence in the mansion was suffocating. I could feel the weight of every servant's gaze on me, their silent judgment pressing against my skin like an unrelenting force. I knew what they were thinking. She's pretending. She'll go back to her cruel ways soon enough. I couldn't blame them. The old Veronica Sinclair had been a nightmare to live with. She had ruled this house with an iron fist, her temper unpredictable, her cruelty deliberate. And Theo, poor sweet Theo, had suffered the most. He was just a little boy, but she had treated him like nothing more than an accessory, a tool to manipulate Blaine into coming home. But I wasn't her. Not anymore. Still, Theo didn't know that. To him, I was the monster he had spent his short life avoiding. And now that I was trying to change, he didn't trust it. He didn't trust me. This morning, I found him crouched in a corner of the library, clutching a book to his chest like a shield. The moment he saw me, his small body tensed, and his knuckles turned white from gripping the book too tightly. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently, kneeling to his level. "What are you reading?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me with those wary brown eyes. His lips pressed into a thin line. The old Veronica would have snapped at him for ignoring her. She would have called him ungrateful, scolded him for his rudeness. But I wasn't her. So, I simply smiled and reached out to brush a lock of his dark hair away from his forehead. Theo flinched. My stomach twisted in knots. What kind of monster was I before? I dropped my hand immediately, forcing my expression to remain soft, even as my heart ached. "It's okay," I whispered. "I won't hurt you." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way he kept his body curled in on itself, ready to bolt if I made the wrong move. My own stepson was afraid of me, and I had no one to blame but myself, or rather the old Veronica. I needed to do more than just say I had changed. I needed to prove it. The tension in the mansion didn't ease. The maid still whispered behind my back. The butler, Mr. Edwards, barely concealed his disdain when addressing me. Even the cook, who had served this family for years, refused to look me in the eye when I asked about Theo's favorite foods. "I'll have his usual meals prepared," she said stiffly, her lips pressed into a disapproving frown. "There's no need for you to concern yourself." The message was clear. We don't trust you with him. It stung more than I wanted to admit, but I couldn't blame them. If I were in their shoes, I wouldn't trust me either. But I had no time to worry about the opinions of the household. My priority was Theo. As I observed Theo's daily routine, I realized something chilling. He was alone. The old Veronica hadn't just been cruel. She had been neglectful. The nannies were strict, leaving no room for comfort or love. His schedule was suffocating, filled with tutors, etiquette lessons, and obligations. There was no time for fun, no space for laughter. No wonder he never smiled. No wonder he flinched at the mere thought of affection. I decided to start small. At dinner, I asked the staff to serve one of my childhood favorites, homemade macaroni and cheese. It was simple, warm, and comforting, something no strict gourmet chef would ever serve in this house. When the plate was set in front of Theo, his eyes widened. He looked at the food, then at me, then back at the food. He didn't touch it. "I know it's different from what you usually eat," I said, keeping my voice light. "But I thought you might like it." He hesitated, then slowly picked up his fork. I held my breath as he took a small bite. His face was carefully neutral, but I saw the way his tiny shoulders relaxed just a bit. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The real horror came when I decided to visit his school. Theo attended one of the most prestigious academies in the city, a school meant for the children of the elite, a place where appearances meant everything, and status dictated worth. I had expected a cold environment, but I hadn't expected this. The moment I walked into the school, I felt it. The teachers' stiff smiles, the murmurs behind my back, the pitying glances sent Theo's way. I met with his teacher, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Calloway. "I wanted to discuss Theo's experience here," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I've noticed he's been withdrawn." She sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Mrs. Sinclair, Theo has always been a reserved child. He doesn't participate, doesn't make friends. Some of the other children have been unkind, but boys need to toughen up." My hands clenched into fists beneath the desk. Toughen up. He was 6 years old. "What do you mean by unkind?" asked, keeping my tone steady. She hesitated before finally answering. "Some teasing. It's to be expected. Children mirror their parents, after all." The implication hit me like a slap to the face. They treat him like this because of me. My voice came out colder than I intended. "And what have you done about it?" She looked taken aback. "Mrs. Sinclair, I want names," I interrupted. "Every child who has bullied my son. And I want to speak to their parents." "That won't be necessary," she said quickly. "I assure you these things sort themselves out." "They won't if no one does anything," I snapped, standing abruptly. "This is not teasing. This is harassment, and if you can't ensure my son's safety, I will personally see to it that this school faces consequences." Her face paled. I didn't care. For the first time since waking up in Veronica Sinclair's body, I felt something close to rage. Not at Theo. Not at myself. But at a world that had let a little boy suffer just because of who his stepmother was. Theo didn't deserve this. I refused to let it continue. As I walked out of that office, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just going to win Theo over. I was going to protect him. Even if it meant burning down everything that hurt him. I should have expected it. Blaine Sinclair was never the type of man to be easily fooled. The moment he returned from his business trip, I could feel his gaze on me. Sharp, assessing, and filled with suspicion. I sat in the grand living room, nervously smoothing my dress as he stood before me. Arms crossed, eyes cold. "You never cared about Theo before," he said, voice low but laced with disbelief. "What are you after this time?" The old Veronica would have batted her lashes, feigned offense, and staged a dramatic outburst to guilt him into submission. I, however, was not that woman anymore. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "I'm not after anything, Blaine. I just realized how much I've hurt Theo. I want to fix it." He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "You expect me to believe that?" His skepticism was understandable. After all, the old Veronica had used Theo as a tool, a bargaining chip to keep Blaine coming home. She would put on an elaborate show of being the doting wife and stepmother whenever he was around, then toss Theo aside the moment she had Blaine's attention. It was sickening to remember. Blaine's eyes narrowed. "If this is some ploy, Veronica, I swear." "It's not," I interrupted, my voice trembling with urgency. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm trying. And if you truly care about Theo, you'd want me to try too." For a moment, his expression flickered, something unreadable passing over his features. But then, just as quickly, the wall came back up. "We'll see," he muttered, turning away. I barely had time to process my conversation with Blaine before the dreaded Sinclair family gathering arrived. It was an event I used to avoid whenever possible, knowing that the other Sinclairs viewed me as nothing more than a gold digger who had tricked their successful heir into marriage. The grand Sinclair estate was bustling with guests when we arrived. Waiters carried trays of expensive champagne, and the hall was filled with the rich, the powerful, and the cruelly judgmental. "Oh, look who decided to show up," came a saccharine voice. I turned to see none other than Olivia Hayes, Blaine's ex-girlfriend. The woman his family had always preferred over me. Tall, elegant, with a perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes, she oozed confidence as she stepped closer. "Olivia," I said evenly, refusing to shrink under her presence. She smiled, faux sympathy dripping from her tone. "I heard you've been trying to play mother all of a sudden. How adorable. But you should know that Theo will never truly see you that way." I clenched my fists. This woman had always been a shadow lurking in my marriage. While Blaine had never openly entertained the idea of rekindling their romance, Olivia had made it clear she wasn't giving up. And the worst part, she had played a role in turning Blaine against me. I just didn't know how deeply her influence ran. "What's wrong, Veronica? You look like you're about to cry," she continued, sipping her wine. "Oh, I'm not going to cry," I replied smoothly, meeting her gaze with steel in my own. "I just feel sorry for you. It must be exhausting, circling around Blaine for all these years and still not having his last name." For the first time, her smile faltered. I took that small victory and turned on my heel, walking away before she could recover. I didn't have time for petty mind games. Not anymore. But Olivia wasn't my only problem that night. Throughout the evening, Blaine's relatives took every opportunity to belittle me. "Veronica, dear, have you finally decided to stop wasting Blaine's money and do something useful?" one of his aunts sneered. "I was sure he'd be filing for divorce by now," another cousin whispered not so quietly to her friend. Old Veronica would have lashed out, thrown a fit, and stormed off in anger. But I held my ground, plastering on a polite smile. When one of the elder Sinclairs directed a particularly cruel remark my way, I simply replied, "I'm sorry you feel that way. But I'm not here to impress you. I'm here for my family." That shut them up. Later that night, as we drove home, Blaine was silent. His fingers tapped against his thigh, an old habit when he was deep in thought. Finally he spoke. "You handled yourself differently tonight." I glanced at him. "Is that a compliment?" He smirked slightly. "Don't push it." I let out a small breath of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. Crack in the ice. I wasn't just fighting to be a better stepmother to Theo. I was fighting to survive in this world. And if I wanted to secure Theo's future, I needed to be smart, not just kind. I never knew how hard it would be to fix something so broken. Theo was a small, quiet child. Far too quiet for someone his age. He was used to being invisible, conditioned to accept cruelty as normal, expecting no kindness from the woman he called stepmother. I saw it in the way he flinched when I spoke, how his tiny fingers clenched the fabric of his school uniform, how he always sat hunched, making himself as small as possible. The damage I, or rather the past Veronica, had done to him was deep. Too deep for mere words to erase. But I wasn't giving up. Started with a phone call. I was just finishing a meeting with one of Blaine's secretaries, working on slowly integrating myself into the family business so I could protect Theo's future, when my phone vibrated. "Madam Sinclair, you need to come to the school immediately." My heart dropped. I grabbed my bag and rushed out. When I arrived, I found Theo standing in the principal's office, his head bowed, while another child, a well-dressed, arrogant-looking boy, stood smugly beside his mother. The principal cleared his throat. It seems Theo attacked another student unprovoked. I narrowed my eyes. Theo. Attacking someone. The mother of the other child scoffed. It's obvious he has no proper upbringing. What else can you expect from a child like him? I felt something cold settle in my chest. Childlike him. I turned to Theo, kneeling so we were eye level. What happened? Theo shook his head violently. His lips pressed into a thin line. He wouldn't speak, probably because no one ever listened to him before. The other boys smirked. He got mad when I said his stepmom didn't love him. Everyone knows it's true. The words felt like a slap to my face. Past Veronica had given everyone a reason to think that way. I had humiliated Theo so much, ignored him so often, that even a child knew he was unloved. Not anymore. I rose to my feet, eyes sharp. Is that true? The boy hesitated. His mother quickly stepped in. That's irrelevant. He hit my son. Because your son was bullying him, I countered smoothly. If Theo were your child, wouldn't you want him to stand up for himself? The mother's face turned red. The principal sighed. Regardless, physical violence is not acceptable. Cut him off. And neither is psychological bullying. Silence. I turned to the principal. Did you call me here to punish my child for defending himself? He swallowed. We just want to maintain a peaceful environment. I let out a sharp laugh. So the bully gets to walk free, and the bullied child gets punished. You must be proud. A few teachers outside paused to listen. Parents whispered. The principal sweated. I softened my voice but made sure it carried power. If this happens again, I will not hesitate to involve the school board and the media. You wouldn't want Starlight Academy to become infamous for covering up bullying, would you? The mother gasped. The principal paled. Theo looked at me wide-eyed. This conversation is over, I said, taking Theo's hand. Come, sweetheart. For the first time he didn't pull away. I took Theo to an amusement park, something the old Veronica never would have done. He sat stiffly in the car, clutching the seatbelt. Where are we going? Smiled. Somewhere fun. Theo stared at me, eyes wary. As if waiting for the punchline, the trick, the inevitable cruelty that always followed. But I just turned up the radio and hummed along. At first, Theo refused to go on any rides. He stood close to me, watching other children laugh and play, his little hands gripping his sleeves. So I didn't push him. Instead, I bought us cotton candy, sat beside him, and let him observe the world. After a while he finally asked, "Is it good?" I held out a piece of cotton candy, grinning. "Try it." He hesitated but took a small bite. His eyes widened slightly. Chuckled. "Good, right?" Theo nodded, chewing slowly. We spent the day walking around, playing small carnival games. Theo didn't say much, but he watched me closely, as if trying to understand who I was now. That night I heard it. Soft whimpers. Choke sob. I rushed into Theo's room. He was curled up in his blankets, trembling. "Mom, don't. I'll be good." My chest ached. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently stroked his hair. "Theo, wake up. It's just a dream, sweetheart." He jolted awake, his little body stiff with fear. His wide, tear-filled eyes met mine. I expected him to flinch, pull away. But he just stared, breathing heavily. I smiled gently. "You're safe. I'm here." Slowly, hesitantly, Theo relaxed. For the first time he let me hold him. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of soft giggling. Theo was sitting on the floor, playing with a tiny toy car, a small, shy smile on his face. I held my breath. That was his first laugh. I had spent weeks trying to win him over, proving I wouldn't hurt him, showing him patience and kindness. And today, for the first time, he was finally starting to believe it. I used to believe that cruelty was power. That the more feared I was, the more control I had over my life. But what kind of power did it really give me? All it had done was create a world where a small child flinched at my every move. Theo's laughter from that morning stayed with me. It was quiet, unsure, but real. His first laugh. It felt like the smallest step forward, yet it made my chest tighten with something I hadn't felt in years. Oh, I wanted to hear it again. That morning, while Theo was playing in the garden under the watchful eye of the housekeepers, I asked for the records of the nannies and caretakers who had been assigned to him over the years. What I found made me sick. The reports were carefully worded, but between the lines, the truth bled through. Theo is difficult to discipline. Ignoring his outbursts is the best course of action. He must learn to obey, or his tantrums will worsen. We have found withholding privileges, such as meals, to be an effective deterrent for misbehavior. Withholding meals. I gripped the papers, my hands shaking. The past Veronica had never cared to look at these reports. She had ignored Theo, never bothering to check how he was being treated. She had let strangers punish him, all while pretending he was simply a difficult child. I forced myself to keep reading. Some nannies had belittled him, mocking him when he cried, telling him he was lucky anyone even kept him. I stared at the reports until the words blurred. I had been awful to Theo, but even I had never realized how bad it was. I felt bile rise in my throat. How much had this child endured? I slammed the reports shut and took a deep breath. Not anymore. I called the head housekeeper. I want every staff member who had a hand in this fired. Today. She hesitated. Madam, some of them have been with the Sinclairs for years. And my voice was sharp, unforgiving. Years of what? Watching a child suffer. Get rid of them. For the first time, the housekeeper met my gaze and nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. I should have known Blaine wouldn't stay silent forever. That evening he summoned me to his office. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. His expression was unreadable as he slid a document toward me. You've been granted access to Sinclair Enterprises' finances and shares. Froze. Sinclair Enterprises. The empire Blaine built. The wealth and power the past Veronica had always craved. Test. I slowly reached for the document and scanned it. With these rights, I could do whatever I wanted. Take money, manipulate stocks, seize assets. The old Veronica would have jumped at the chance. But I wasn't her anymore. I set the papers down and leaned back in my chair. I don't want it. Blaine's brows lifted. Excuse me. I met his gaze steadily. I don't need access to the company's finances. I don't need more wealth. I just need Theo to be okay. For the first time, Blaine looked surprised. He studied me, his sharp eyes calculating, waiting for me to slip. When I didn't, he leaned back and smirked. You really have changed, haven't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. At home, Theo and I sat together in the living room. It was the first time he willingly stayed beside me, and I cherished every second of it. He was drawing quietly, occasionally glancing at me as if still trying to figure out who I was now. Then it happened. He reached for his glass of juice but knocked it over, the red liquid spilling across the pristine white rug. Theo froze. His small hands clenched, his breathing went shallow, and his entire body went stiff. Panic flooded his little face. I could see the terror in his eyes, the way he braced himself. Because he expected me to scream at him. Because in his world, mistakes led to punishments. My heart shattered. I took a deep breath, forcing my emotions down, and then I laughed. Not just a small chuckle. A genuine laugh that filled the room. Theo's wide, fearful eyes snapped to me in shock. Oops, I said lightly, standing up. Looks like the rug was thirsty. I grabbed a towel and dabbed at the stain. We should probably teach this rug some manners. Theo didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly he looked down at his shaking hands. You're not mad. His voice was barely above a whisper. I smiled at him. Of course not. It's just juice, sweetheart. Theo stared at me like he didn't understand the words, like they were foreign. Then his little lip trembled. He burst into tears. Silent body-racking sobs. Not because he was hurt but because he wasn't. I dropped the towel and pulled him into my arms. He clutched at me, his tiny fingers digging into my shirt. You're safe, I whispered into his hair. You're always safe with me. He sobbed harder. That night I tucked Theo into bed, smoothing the blanket over his small frame. His eyes were red, his face tired from crying. But for the first time he didn't look afraid. I brushed his hair back gently. "Sleep well, sweetheart." I turned to leave when his small voice stopped me. "Good night, Mom." Froze. My breath caught in my throat. The words settled deep into my heart, warming parts of me I thought were long dead. I turned back, my vision blurring. Theo was already curled up, his breathing soft and steady. I covered my mouth, holding back a sob. Then I turned off the light and gently closed the door behind me. I could still hear his voice. "Good night, Mom." The words had been so soft, so hesitant, yet they held the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. That one simple phrase from Theo had shaken me more than any confrontation, more than any insult Blaine had thrown my way, more than any of Olivia's schemes. It meant something, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. I always knew that power struggles existed in high society, but I never thought I'd be fighting one inside my own home. The estate was vast, filled with staff who moved like silent shadows. And yet, among them, I knew there was one snake in particular, one person still trying to pull Theo away from me. After I had fired the previous caretakers, things had improved, but there was still something off. Theo would take 2 steps forward with me, opening up, trusting me, but then I'd see him recoil as if something had snatched him back. I started watching more closely, and then I found her. Her name was Margaret. She was one of Olivia's loyalists. Quiet, unassuming, the perfect kind of person to slip past undetected. She had been in the house since before I came back, blending into the background like wallpaper. But she wasn't invisible to Theo. I noticed how he stiffened whenever she was near. I saw the way she would whisper to him in hushed tones, her lips barely moving. And the worst part, Theo never told me about it, because someone had taught him that speaking up never made things better. That was all I needed to know. That night, I stormed into Blaine's office without knocking. "I need access to the security footage." Blaine, who had been on a call, simply held up a finger, completely unfazed by my dramatic entrance. I crossed my arms and tapped my foot loudly until he sighed and hung up. "You're getting better at being annoying," he said, rubbing his temples. "What now?" I leaned forward. "Someone is still hurting Theo." His expression darkened instantly. The change was subtle but undeniable. The way his hands clasped together, the way his gaze sharpened. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled up the footage. And what I saw made me feel sick. Margaret was never outright cruel. She was smart about it. She knelt beside Theo, her voice low and venomous. "She'll leave you again. She doesn't really love you. She's only pretending." A twisted, psychological warfare, planting seeds of doubt in a child who had already been abandoned once. Theo, my sweet little boy, just stood there and took it. Blaine didn't speak for a long time. And then, quietly, he said, "She's working for Olivia." It wasn't a question. We both knew the answer. It wasn't just about Margaret. As I started piecing things together, I realized Olivia had been playing me for years. She had manipulated me before, whispering insecurities into my ears and convincing me that I needed to be ruthless, cold, that I needed to become untouchable. And I had fallen for it. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. No more. The Sinclair Foundation's annual gala was a grand event. A room full of the richest, most scandalous people in society, all dressed in their finest while whispering behind one another's backs. And Olivia thrived in these waters. She stood at Blaine's side, poised and elegant, like a queen surveying her court. But I wasn't here to play by her rules. I was here to end her. I stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. Blaine turned toward me, surprised. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said smoothly, "before we continue tonight's festivities, I would like to share something." I turned my gaze to Olivia, watching as she stiffened ever so slightly. A betrayal has been hiding in the shadows for far too long. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Olivia's smile was still there, but it had cracked at the edges. I held up a file. Proof of how she had manipulated me. Of how she had ensured Blaine never trusted me. Of how she had systematically torn this family apart. For years, this woman has played us all like puppets. I met her gaze head-on. But tonight, I'm cutting the strings. Olivia finally snapped. You little. She lunged for me. Now here's the funny part. I saw it coming a mile away. And so, instead of dodging dramatically like in the movies, I just stepped aside. Olivia, in all her glorious rage, ended up tripping on her own gown. She crashed into a waiter carrying a towering tray of champagne glasses, sending them tumbling down in a spectacular cascade of golden liquid and broken glass. The entire room gasped and blinked. That was not part of my plan, but I was going to roll with it. Olivia, drenched in champagne and absolutely seething, turned to Blaine for help. But Blaine just stared at her. His expression unreadable. Enough, he said coldly. For the first time, Olivia looked afraid. And just like that, her reign was over. As the night went on, people whispered. Olivia shrank into the background, and I didn't give her a second glance. 'Cause my focus was on Theo. He had been waiting for me at the side of the ballroom, his small hands gripping the edge of his coat. When I knelt down, he threw himself into my arms. Gasps filled the air, but I didn't care. Theo clung to me, his little voice clear and strong. My mom. Not stepmother. Not Veronica. The entire room froze. Blaine did too. And when I looked up, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Something I wasn't ready to name. But I would. If someone had told me a few weeks ago that I would be willingly waking up at dawn to make breakfast for Theo, I would have laughed in their face. But here I was, standing in the grand kitchen of the Sinclair mansion, flipping pancakes while a 6-year-old boy sat at the counter, kicking his tiny feet and watching me with a cautious sort of curiosity. Are you sure it's safe to eat? Theo asked, peering at the pancake like it might explode at any moment. I placed a hand over my heart in mock offense. Excuse you. I'll have you know I followed a YouTube tutorial very carefully. Theo squinted. Is that why the first 3 burned? Gasp. You were supposed to forget about those. A soft giggle escaped his lips, and I pretended not to be affected by how rare it was to hear him laugh. Instead, I dramatically flipped the next pancake onto his plate. Go on, take a bite. If it's terrible, we'll order a backup breakfast and never speak of this again. Theo hesitated, but after a few seconds, he took a careful bite. His eyes widened. It's good. Victory. I resisted the urge to fist pump in celebration. See. Your stepmother is a woman of many talents. He chewed thoughtfully before looking up at me. Mom. I nearly dropped the syrup bottle. It wasn't the first time he had called me that, but each time, it felt like a little piece of my heart melted. I had done terrible things in the past. Hurt him, belittled him, ignored him. But somehow, this little boy had still found it in him to forgive me. I ruffled his soft brown hair. Eat up, kiddo. You have school today. Later that evening, I found Blaine in his home office, going through reports with the usual expression of cold efficiency. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him. He looked tired. Busy? Yes. He glanced up, his sharp blue eyes assessing me. You never cared about my work before. What do you want? Decide. I guess I deserved that. Relax, Sinclair. I'm not here to ask for money or throw a tantrum. His brow lifted slightly in amusement. That would be a first. I rolled my eyes but took a seat across from him. I actually wanted to talk about Theo. His face immediately hardened. Is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. I think he wants a sibling. Blaine's pen slipped from his fingers. I barely contained my laughter at the sheer horror on his face. He blinked at me as if I had just suggested we adopt a pet dragon. What? He finally managed. I bit my lip to keep from smirking. Apparently, he's been asking some of the house staff how babies are made. Blaine groaned, rubbing his temples. God help me. Oh, and he's convinced that if we have another baby, You'll stay home more often. Blaine straightened, his expression unreadable. Is that what he thinks? He nodded. He loves you. He just doesn't know how to say it. Blaine exhaled, leaning back in his chair. I've failed him, haven't I? I shook my head. No, you just haven't been present. There's still time to fix that. Something flickered in his gaze, something almost vulnerable, but it was gone just as quickly. He picked up his pen again. I'll think about it. That was probably the best answer I was going to get for now. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Word had gotten out that I had defended Theo at his school, and suddenly, the media was shifting their perspective on me. Mrs. Sinclair, is it true that you've been personally handling Theo's school affairs? A reporter asked me as I stepped out of a charity event one evening. I gave a practiced smile. As any mother would. That one sentence sent the internet into a frenzy. Blogs debated whether I had turned over a new leaf or if I was playing a long game. Social media was split between calling me a changed woman or a manipulative strategist. But for once, I didn't care about the opinions of strangers. All I cared about was the little boy who clung to my hand a little tighter every day. One night, I convinced Blaine to have a proper family dinner with Theo and me. Theo was ecstatic. He sat between us at the grand dining table, swinging his feet as we ate. Halfway through the meal, he suddenly blurted out, "So, when are you and Mom having a baby?" Blaine choked on his wine. I thumped his back while trying not to die of laughter. "I what?" Blaine wheezed. Theo looked at him seriously. "A sibling, Dad. I think it'll be good for all of us." Blaine stared at him like he had grown a second head. I, meanwhile, was struggling to keep a straight face. "Theo, sweetheart," I said gently. "That's not exactly how it works." He frowned. "Why not?" Blaine ran a hand down his face. "We'll discuss this later." Theo pouted but didn't argue. Later that night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with those big, hopeful eyes. "Are you happy, Mom?" I stroked his hair, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I am. Because I have you." He beamed. "Then I'm happy too." As I walked back to my room, I paused outside Blaine's study. He was sitting at his desk, deep in thought. "You okay?" he asked. He looked up, something unreadable in his gaze. "Theo wants a family. A real one." He nodded. "So let's give him one." Blaine was silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. "Maybe it's time I start coming home earlier." For the first time in years, I saw a future where we weren't just playing roles, where we could actually be a family. And this time I wouldn't let anything ruin it.